Hey guys, this is Mugdha Pradhan. You're watching me on FitTak. I am the CEO and founder of iThrive, and I practice something called as functional nutrition. Today we're going to talk about this pervasive syndrome or dysfunction that's impacting a lot of people called IBS. What is IBS? It stands for Irritable Bowel Syndrome. And symptoms of IBS usually include gas, bloating. IBS can manifest as IBS diarrhea, or it can manifest as IBS constipation, or sometimes it can be both. Like on some days, a person can experience constipation, on some days, a person can experience diarrhea. People who struggle with IBS also have frequent bowel movements, very, very sensitive to a lot of foods. So it's a condition where basically your gut is dysfunctional, and because of that gut dysfunction, it starts impacting everyday quality of life. As a condition, it's not something that we are born with. IBS is something that gets triggered because of your environment, your lifestyle choices, your food. In certain cases, maybe you're genetically more predisposed towards gut issues, but it's usually something that has cropped up later in life, and therefore it's a dysfunction that can be 100% reversed. Now, what do you really need to do if you're struggling with IBS? How can you go ahead and reverse a condition like this? Well, it starts off with finding of the root causes. So in my work, I've seen typically the most common triggers for IBS are a dysfunctional gut microbiome. So we have both good bacteria and bad bacteria in our gut. Not just bacteria, we have like fungi and so many things. But if the balance of the good guys becomes lesser and the bad guys goes up, then what can happen is it can create a dysfunctional microbiome. So something like an H. pylori infection, for example, can trigger so much gas and bloating and acid reflux. And it's not meant to be in that quantities, or even something like, let's say, a candida infection. So all of these microbes can cause a lot of the symptoms of IBS. And if that is indeed at the root cause of what's triggering your IBS, then treating these infections with the right kind of, not necessarily antibiotics, but using herbs that have antibacterial properties, using all of these different kind of herbs and molecules, plant-based compounds, you can bring down the infection load. And then of course you add a good probiotic that has the right kind of microorganisms, so you bring balance back in your gut. So that's how you treat if your IBS is happening because of a gut microbiome issues. The second reason why people struggle with IBS is they're eating foods that trigger inflammation in the gut. They're eating foods that they're sensitive to. They're eating foods that can trigger all of the symptoms of IBS. Now, what foods are these? So, most common culprits are dairy. A lot of people in India have lactose intolerance, or they cannot even digest the protein from milk, which is casein. So, dairy is a big contributor to IBS symptoms. Other than dairy, you have things like gluten. People don't realize how much gluten can cause gut issues, but gluten is so gluten is present in wheat and wheat products predominantly. So your atta, rava, maida, pasta, all of these things are gluten containing products, including your baked products. So your cookies and cakes and brownies and kharis and khakaras, all of these have gluten in them. The third most common trigger that we've seen in our work is all these big legumes. So your chole, rajma, all the pulses, sometimes for a lot of people even dals can trigger it, because these big pulses and the smaller dals also have something called as lectins in them, and lectins can trigger gas and bloating in a lot of people. What other trigger foods? Seed oils. So for a lot of people, they don't realize how sensitive they are to these vegetable oils. Could be groundnut oil, sesame seed oil, mustard seed oil. What else do people use? Safflower oil, sunflower oil. All of these seed oils can trigger gut inflammation and therefore trigger IBS-like symptoms. In fact, people realize this: if they eat a lot of heavy fried food, then they have a lot of belching, bloating, and then they might end up with diarrhea the next day. So food is one reason why IBS symptoms could get triggered. Another lesser known, so again, microbiome and food people are aware of, but there's a third lesser known reason, which is toxins. So, and we've seen this even with our clients, like if you eat an organic potato versus a conventionally grown potato, the conventionally grown potato can trigger gas and bloating. So we've seen this with so many cases, because the toxins, which is your pesticides, fertilizers, all of these compounds that are present in this food, or even toxins coming from your personal care, like if you're using makeup that is toxic, if you're using lipstick that are toxic, these toxins can go and accumulate in your gut and then cause inflammation in the gut and cause IBS-like symptoms. Apart from that, if you have a liver that's not functioning well, if you have a thyroid that's not functioning well, these can trigger either IBS diarrhea, IBS constipation, the production of your bile. If it's not adequate, then that can trigger digestive issues, and then you might have undigested food in your stools. So the causes are many. Now, the key to reversing this condition is finding the root cause and going to the root and treating it from there.